20 years. 2 decades of mortgage payments and holiday dinners, and fixing the garage door in January. And she delivered the whole thing in one sentence, standing by the refrigerator with her coat still on. What she didn't know was that I'd been ready for weeks. And by the time she finished talking, it was already too late for her. My name's Nolan, 51 years old, and I've spent the last 22 of them designing ventilation systems for commercial buildings, schools, hospitals, warehouses. If the air moves right in a building, that's probably someone like me who made it happen. Not glamorous, but I'm good at it, and the company keeps sending me to bigger jobs. Diane and I got married when I was 26, and she was 23. Back then, she worked front desk at a dentist's office. Over the years, she moved into hospital administration, eventually landing a coordinator role for volunteer programs at Mercy General downtown. 3 evenings a week, she ran events, organized shifts, managed the schedule. Good hours, decent pay, and she genuinely liked the people. For a long time, things between us were fine. Not exciting, fine. We stopped surprising each other somewhere around year 15. I'd come home from a job site. She'd come home from the hospital. We'd eat dinner, watch something, go to bed. Weekends meant yard work or a visit to her sister's place. That was the rhythm, and I thought we'd both made peace with it. What I didn't notice was when the rhythm changed. That's the part that still gets me. I design systems for a living, airflow, pressure, balance. If something shifts by half a degree, I'm supposed to catch it. But in my own house, I missed it completely. Until Route 9. 3 weeks before that kitchen conversation, I was wrapping up a job in Kearney, about 2 hours south. Industrial ventilation for a meat packing facility, the kind of project where you're on site for 3 days straight, sleeping in a motel that smells like carpet cleaner and burnt coffee. I finished Thursday afternoon instead of Friday morning, which saved me a day. Called Diane on the drive to let her know I was heading back early. No answer, so I left a voicemail. Figured she was in the middle of a volunteer shift. Her Thursday nights were usually booked solid. I took Route 9 north because the interstate had construction backing up traffic for miles. Stopped at a gas station outside of Milford to fill up, walked inside to grab a water. And that's when I saw it through the window, across the road, parked outside a restaurant called Polini's. Silver Subaru Outback. Our auto shop sticker on the rear glass. Diane was supposed to be at Mercy General, which is an hour and 40 minutes in the opposite direction. I stood there with the water bottle in my hand, staring at that car through a gas station window, and my first thought was that I had to be wrong. Maybe I was looking at a different silver Outback, but I knew our sticker. I paid for the water, walked to my truck, pulled into the lot across the street, and parked 3 rows behind the Subaru. Cut the engine and waited. 40 minutes I sat there before the restaurant door opened. Diane came out first, different clothes than what she'd wear to the hospital. Dark blouse, earrings I'd never seen before. Behind her was a guy, young, mid-20s with an athletic build and dark hair. He put his hand on the small of her back as they crossed the parking lot, and she leaned into it like it belonged there. That wasn't a coworker walk. That wasn't a friend. They got into a black Audi parked 2 spots from Diane's Subaru. She took the passenger side. He drove, and they pulled onto Route 9 heading south toward the row of motels near the highway junction. Her car stayed behind in the lot like a piece of evidence she forgot to hide. My wife, 48 years old, 20 years married to me, getting into a car with a kid who looked younger than half the guys on my work crew. I grabbed my phone, got 3 shots, his Audi and her Subaru side by side in the lot, and one of them walking to his car, his hand on the small of her back. Date and time stamped. Then I put the phone down, started the engine, and drove 2 hours home without turning on the radio. Walked into the house at 10:15. Empty, of course. Stood in the hallway for about 10 seconds, then went straight to the kitchen, opened my laptop, and pulled up the Mercy General website. The hospital's volunteer page had every upcoming event listed publicly: fundraisers, blood drives, community nights, all with dates. I scrolled back through January, February, March, April, looking for Thursday evening programming. Nothing. Not a single Thursday event since December. They'd moved all Thursday programming to Saturdays back in January, and it was right there on the public calendar for anyone to see. Which meant that every Thursday since January, Diane had been telling me she was at the hospital. And every Thursday since January, she wasn't. 4 months of lies, scheduled like clockwork. I closed the laptop and sat there for a minute, just letting that number settle. Next morning at work, I pulled up the Mercy General Staff directory online during lunch, typed rehabilitation into the search bar, and scrolled through the photos. Third row, there he was. Reed Dunham, physical therapist, rehab department. 25 years old, licensed the previous year. Same jaw, same dark hair. The kid from the parking lot had a name now. 25. He wasn't even born when Diane and I got married. That afternoon, I called a family attorney named Bridges. A coworker had used him during his own divorce 2 years back and said he was sharp and fast. I drove to his office after my shift, sat down, and laid out everything in 30 minutes. The car at Polini's, Reed Dunham, the dead Thursday schedule, the photos on my phone. Bridges didn't flinch. He said the first move was protecting assets. Our house, my pension, the savings account, and that he could have papers ready in 10 days. I told him to make it 7. While Bridges worked on the paperwork, I went through our bank statements online one evening after Diane went to bed. Not to build a case for court, just to see what I'd been missing. The answer was 3 withdrawals over 3 months. 800 here, 600 there, another 1,200. All from our joint savings, all in amounts small enough that I'd never noticed them. None of it matched anything on our shared calendar or household expenses. $2,600, gone somewhere I couldn't trace and didn't really need to. The part that hit me wasn't the money itself, it was the pattern. Every withdrawal fell within a day of one of her Thursday shifts. She'd pull the cash on Wednesday, then disappear on Thursday. Like a system, 20 years of building something together, and she'd been quietly pulling it apart a few $100s at a time. That night at dinner, Diane went on about a Saturday volunteer event, some issue with the catering company double booking the venue. I sat across from her, ate my food, nodded where it made sense to nod. But my hands were tied under the table, and I could feel my jaw locking up every time she smiled at me like nothing was wrong. Halfway through the meal, I stood up, told her I had project files to review, and walked out to the garage. Sat down at my workbench and opened a blueprint I'd already finished, just to have something in front of me. 5 more days until Bridges called. On day 3, I did something that surprised even me. It was Saturday morning and Diane was out at her actual volunteer shift, the Saturday one, the real one, so I had the house to myself. I sat down at the kitchen table with a sheet of paper and an envelope. The letter was addressed to Connie Dunham, Reed's wife. They'd gotten married young. She was 24, worked as a dental hygienist across town. I found their home address through the county property records, which are public information in our state. Took me 4 minutes online. 3 sentences. My name, what I saw on Route 9, the date, time, and location, and 1 line at the end. I thought you had the right to know, the same way I would have wanted to know. I sealed the envelope, stamped it, and drove it to the post office myself. Handed it to the clerk at the counter because I wanted to know for certain it went out. I'm not going to pretend I didn't know what that letter would do. I knew it would blow up Reed's marriage. And if I'm being honest, that didn't bother me one bit. But that wasn't the reason I wrote it. The reason was simpler than that. Connie was 24 years old and married to a liar, and she deserved to find out now instead of wasting 5 more years discovering it on her own. A phone call is too easy to deny. A text can be deleted, but a letter on paper with a name and a date is hard to throw away. On day 7, Bridges called. Everything was ready. The house was protected. Mortgage had always been in my name. Pension flagged. Savings account frozen per the filing. Divorce petition drawn up and waiting. I picked up the envelope from his office on the way home and put it in the glove box of my truck. Tuesday night, Diane came home from work. The real work, not the Thursday kind. Hung up her coat, poured herself a glass of water, and stood by the refrigerator. Something about the way she planted her feet and squared her shoulders told me this was the conversation she'd been building up to. Nolan, I need to talk to you. I leaned against the counter across from her. Didn't sit down. I've been thinking for a while now, she said, keeping her voice level, almost rehearsed. I need some space. I think I need to live on my own for a bit and figure out who I am outside of this. She paused, waited for me to react, and when I didn't, she kept going. There's someone. At the hospital. She didn't look away. He makes me feel alive again. Like I was already dead. Like 20 years of keeping a roof over our heads and showing up every single day was just the background noise she'd finally learned to tune out. I reached into the drawer behind me, the one with the takeout menus and old batteries, and pulled out the envelope from Bridges. Set it on the counter between us. I finished early in Kearney 3 weeks ago, I said. Stopped for gas on Route 9. Your Subaru was parked at Polini's. You weren't in it. Her face didn't move, but her hand tightened around the glass. I watched you walk out with a 25-year-old kid in a navy blazer. I watched you get into his car and drive toward the motels on the highway. I sat in my truck for 10 minutes, deciding whether to follow you. I didn't. Went home and called a lawyer instead. I tapped the envelope on the counter. You're 3 weeks late, Diane. She didn't open the envelope right away, just stared at it like it was something that might go off in her hands. Then she picked it up, slid out the papers, and started reading the first page right there by the refrigerator, still standing, still holding her water glass in the other hand. You froze the account, she whispered. $2,600, I said. Wednesdays before your Thursday shifts. I didn't need a detective, Diane. I needed a bank statement. That one landed harder than the rest of it. I watched her face change. Not sadness, not guilt, but the slow realization that every move she'd thought was invisible had been sitting in a column of numbers the whole time. Nolan, this isn't. She stopped herself mid-sentence, took a breath, tried again. I was going to tell you. I wasn't just going to disappear. You've been disappearing every Thursday since January. She set the papers down on the counter, walked into the living room, and sat on the edge of the couch. I stayed where I was in the kitchen, didn't follow her. After a long stretch of silence, she asked, "What do you want me to do?" "Whatever you want, Diane. That's what you've been doing anyway. But not from this house and not with my money." She left that night, packed one bag, called her sister, and drove away without saying another word. I locked the front door behind her, stood in the hallway for about 10 seconds listening to the engine fade, then walked back to the kitchen, poured myself a bourbon, and called Bridges to let him know she'd been served. 3 days later, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. Something made me pick up anyway. "Nolan? This is Connie Dunham." Young voice. Trying to hold steady, but not quite getting there. "I got your letter," she said. I sat with it for 2 days before I confronted him. He broke down and admitted everything. For months, just like you wrote. I started to say I was sorry she had to find out that way, but she cut me off. "I need you to hear something." Her voice went flat and careful, like she was reading from a script she'd been writing in her head all day. "I'm 3 months pregnant. Reed and we'd just found out before your letter showed up. I was 3 months pregnant and picking out paint colors for the nursery, and then I opened your envelope, and my whole life fell apart in the time it took to read 3 sentences. I didn't have an answer for that. There wasn't one. You did what you thought was right," she said. "Maybe you were right, but you didn't think for 1 second about what it would do to me. You thought about what you'd want, not what I'd need." The line went quiet. I could hear her breathing. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. Not for the letter, but for the fact that her life had been wrecked by a man she trusted and then finished off by a stranger with a stamp and an envelope. She hung up without saying goodbye. I sat at the kitchen table for a while after that. The thing about doing the right thing is that nobody hands you a trophy for it. Sometimes you just sit alone in a quiet house and wonder if right was the word you should have used. The next morning, Diane called. Different voice entirely. Tight, sharp, loaded. Reed told me his wife knew. He said someone sent her a letter. A beat of silence. "That was you." "Yes. You destroyed everything, Nolan. You didn't just leave me. You made sure there was nothing left for me to go to. His wife is pregnant. Did you know that?" "No, I didn't." "Well, she is. And now she's alone. And Reed can barely look at himself. And you're sitting in that house feeling like the hero of your own story." 3 seconds of silence. Then I said what I knew to be true, even if it didn't feel as clean as it had a week ago. "You destroyed everything, Diane. Not me. I told the truth to one person who deserved to hear it. What she does with it is her choice. What he did to her is his fault. And what you did to us is yours." She hung up. Reed resigned from Mercy General within 2 weeks. Word was that Connie's complaint to the administration made staying uncomfortable enough that he didn't wait to be pushed. Last I heard through a mutual acquaintance, he'd moved back to his parents' place somewhere in Indiana. Whether Connie went with him or filed on her own, I never found out. That was her life now, not mine. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't think about her. 24 years old, pregnant, opening a letter from a man she'd never met. I still believe she had the right to know. I also know that being right doesn't undo the damage of how someone finds out. Both things are true at the same time, and I've stopped trying to pick one. Diane signed the divorce papers after 3 weeks of her attorney going back and forth with Bridges. She pushed for half the house equity, but the bank withdrawals and the time-stamped photos from the parking lot didn't leave her much room to negotiate. In the end, she agreed to the terms. The house stayed mine. The $2,600 came back as part of the settlement, pension untouched. She moved into an apartment across town and kept her job at the hospital, different department now. I heard through a mutual friend that she'd cut her hair short and started going to some kind of support group. Didn't ask for details. Wasn't my business anymore. On a Friday afternoon, my project manager called with news. The company had landed a contract for a new elementary school on the east side. Full HVAC design. Biggest job in the district's budget that year. He asked if I wanted to lead it. Yeah, I said. I'll take it. Monday morning. First day on the school project. I walked the empty building with the architect. Concrete floors, open ceilings, rooms that didn't have names yet, just numbers on a blueprint. She pointed at the cafeteria space and said they wanted the air system invisible. No visible ducts, no noise, nothing mechanical showing. Just clean air for 400 kids who'd never think about where it came from. I stood in the middle of that empty room and pulled out my notebook. Started sketching the way I always do. Lines first, then angles, then the airflow paths that nobody sees, but everybody breathes. The kind of work I could do with my eyes closed, except this one I wanted to get exactly right. On my way out to the truck, I called my brother Warren. Hadn't talked to him in months. Not for any bad reason. Just the usual drift that happens when you're busy pretending your life is fine. Hey, I've got 2 tickets to the Reds game Saturday. You in? He laughed. Since when do you go to baseball? Since this week. I got in the truck and set my notebook on the passenger